We need a federal government that genuinely cares about the health and wellness of all people, not just people born on American soil, and not just when it puts more money in their wallets or gains political traction. If you're part of Group 7, you have the duty of making this go viral, because we need to talk about the legislation that the Trump administration pushed out to target domestic terrorism, which is extremely broad and vague legislation which would allow the Trump administration to target anybody and everybody they deem as anti-American based on their own opinions, which is unconstitutional and conspiracy against our rights. Quote, common threads animating this violent conduct include anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity, support for the overthrow of the United States government, extremism on migration, race, and gender, and hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. Through this comprehensive strategy, law enforcement will disband and uproot networks, entities, and organizations that promote organized violence, violent intimidation, conspiracies against rights, and other efforts to disrupt the functioning of a democratic society. Now, we need to remind ourselves the corruption our country was created from. Our ancestors stole indigenous people's land, brutalized them, dehumanized them, and created a disproportionate society for them while exploiting their resources and cultures. And we still, to this day, exploit their resources and cultures and dehumanize them and brutalize them. Residential schools were created to indoctrinate and dehumanize indigenous children and groom them into being profit margins for the American government and economy. And the two documented schools in Illinois still exist under different names, but one remains with human rights violations. And you can go see a list of documented fascist indoctrination facilities through the description of my YouTube. Both indigenous and African Americans were subject to extremely dehumanizing, vituperatively exploitative, and vile treatment during the slave trade and early colonization, and still to this day face discrimination for simply being darker skinned, looking different, or simply holding different beliefs than people of European descent or who hold traditional conservative values. And it's very important to understand that law enforcement fundamentally misrepresents, underrepresents, and neglects cases and data involving Indigenous, African, and Latino Americans, among other marginalized groups. Indigenous people were reported missing at a rate of 3.5%, which is extremely disproportionate compared to their population range of 1.1% in the US, meaning their rate of going missing is over 3 times their population range. Indigenous, African, and Mexican Americans are often, and at disproportionate rates compared to people of European descent, found to be targets of police brutality. And people who are called minorities being targets of police brutality is not unique to America. African Americans were found to have been victims of homicide at 7 times the rate of people of European descent as of 2023 in one area of the United States, 83% of them due to the dysregulation of firearms. Although we cannot use generalized statistics to give a good understanding of individual communities in the United States, African Americans as a whole make up 13 to 14% of the population, but are found to be victims of crime at almost 2 times their population range at about a rate of 25%, which is extremely disproportionate. A Washington Post investigation found that data reported to the FBI on fatal police shootings was undercounted by more than half. This is largely because local police departments are not required to report these incidents to the federal government. Although half of the people shot and killed by police are white, Black Americans are shot at a disproportionate rate. They account for roughly 14% of the US population and are killed by police at more than twice the rate of white Americans, which highlights the fact that our law enforcement fundamentally misrepresents and neglects cases involving African Americans. Hispanic Americans are also killed by police at a disproportionate rate. Now, this is the kind of domestic terrorism that the government needs to be focused on, but the Trump administration has made it clear that they don't care about domestic terrorism. They just care about controlling people. Now, let's get into corrupt things the Trump administration and Trump himself have done that go against their own legislation of targeting domestic terrorism. The Trump administration has been undermining and neglecting victims of gun violence and substance abuse. His administration removed a memorial honoring victims of gun violence and canceled scheduled grants which would have gone to victims of gun violence, domestic violence, and substance abuse. Quote, Trump's budget proposal seeks to cut nearly $500 million in funding to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, which enforces federal gun laws and helps investigate violent crimes. This proves the Trump administration couldn't care less about national security and protecting citizens from true domestic terrorism. All they care about is control and what can benefit their fascist regime. This is extremely anti-American and impedes on human rights and disrupts a functioning democratic society, and it's just beyond immoral. A hate group originally created by Charlie Kirk called Turning Point USA, which is now upheld by his followers, targeted Professor Mark Bray, who works at Rutgers University. He teaches anti-fascism and our world's history of fighting fascism. He teaches people how to identify fascist regimes and to fight and organize against them. But after he was targeted by Fox News and Turning Point USA, he was sent an email with his address, which means he was doxxed, and he and his family were sent death threats, forcing them to leave the country. The Trump administration is coming after public education as a whole, pushing extremely indoctrinating curriculum, which undermines and misrepresents the true history of the United States, pushing white supremacist ideologies, and taking children's freedom of expression. The curriculum the administration is pushing for is anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as anti-civil rights division, meaning the curriculum the Trump administration wants to push would eliminate efforts taken against racial discrimination in classrooms and opens the door for misogynistic and inconsiderate ideologies to be taught against women, disabled people, the LGBTQ community, and marginalized groups such as Indigenous people, African, Muslim, and Latino Americans, among others. The curriculum undermines the slogan, Land of the Free, which makes the legislation extremely anti-American and conspiratorial against human rights. Trump also carries responsibility for the violent riot at the White House that occurred on January 6th, and while he did use some peaceful language, he also used language which incites violence. However, he was charged with conspiring to obstruct the election certification, conspiring to defraud the United States of accurate election results, and depriving the U.S. voters of their voting rights. Multiple academic sources confirm that Trump's social media activity and rhetoric had direct correlation with the violence that occurred. Trump later pardoned nearly 1,600 people charged in connection with the Capitol attack. And it's very worth it to recite the fact that Donald Trump engaged in an unprecedented criminal effort to unlawfully retain power after losing the 2020 election, Jack Smith said in a report published by the U.S. Justice Department. Which not only is engaging in conspiracy and inciting political violence, but it was also efforts to disrupt a functioning democratic society. Also, during his speech, which incited the January 6th riot, Trump called the Supreme Court his puppets, which is conspiracy and is an effort to disrupt a functioning democratic society. And I have the transcription from that speech in the description of my YouTube. It's very worth it to at least read some of it because it really does give you a good understanding of how idiotic Trump is. Reading it on screen makes it much easier to decode how stupid he sounds. Genuinely, like, you are insane if you read it and then you think it makes any sense. Because it doesn't. Continuing on, Trump has also expressed extremely violent and radical views on immigration, as well as taking away rights to those who are looking to become legal citizens in the United States or pause the citizenship they currently hold without due process, and has completely demonized any and all people who look to contribute to the United States economy but simply weren't born here, which doesn't just fall under organized violence, conspiracies against rights, and efforts to disrupt a functioning democratic society. It falls under domestic terrorism as a whole, because it demonizes all migrants, which is just dehumanizing, and it's a breach of international and national security, and it makes our country extremely untrustworthy. According to senior official Aaron Reichland, who works on the American Immigration Council, the DHS stopped posting monthly immigration enforcement data once Trump took office, which makes the Trump administration's claims of deporting over 2 million immigrants within the last 9 months untrustworthy, which concludes those claims fall under violent conspiracy and conspiracy against rights. According to independent media, ICE is now better funded than most of the world's military, after Trump shoveled over $75 billion into the agency. But it has been reported that at least 17 people have died in immigration detention in the fiscal year of 2025, which ended in September, marking the deadliest year for immigration detainees, which simply should not be the case since the agency is better funded than most of the world's military with their $75 billion budget, yet people are still dying in their care, in their hands. What's with that? That seems like a breach of national security to me. According to Axios, Trump made statements condoning and encouraging violence throughout his presidency. A New York Times report outlined various strategies Trump had allegedly deliberated to keep migrants away from the U.S. southern border, including a water-filled trench with snakes or alligators and shooting migrants in the legs to slow them down. Again, makes us extremely untrustworthy. It impedes on human rights, and it's extremely immoral because it demonizes all migrants. That disrupts a functioning democratic society as well. And fact check found that ICE on many occasions has been found denying people their rights to due process, arresting U.S. citizens, and following through with deportations despite the illegality of it. And at least half of the people being detained by ICE have no criminal background. ICE has been found to violate the Immigration and Nationality Act as well as Supreme Court rulings, which is, quote, not merely a policy issue, but has become a legal issue, according to FactCheck. Roman Srotsev, a man who now has a wife and children, survived the Soviet Union and came as a refugee at the age of 4, and got into some legal trouble in the state of California as a teenager. Served his time, got his green card, and does routine check-ins with immigration enforcement. While he was lawfully abiding by a routine check-in, he was illegally detained and almost sent to Ukraine, which he does not have citizenship in, and could have been drafted into a war he has nothing to do with, which his lawyers are fighting against. He has now been illegally detained for 2 months, and his fate is still unknown, which should not be the case. This falls under blatant denial of human rights and impedes on a functioning democratic society. Despite Sorotsev's horrible situation, he is getting off lucky, because most people who have been illegally detained didn't or don't have the chance at legal representation, and the president said himself earlier in the year that due to his unprecedented uprising on immigration crackdown, not everyone the ICE agency illegally detains will be able to be represented in court, which again impedes human rights and implicates the disruption of a democratic society. The ICE agency has been found guilty of denying people their rights to representation in court and illegally detaining people without probable cause, which are violations of human rights and the Constitution. The U.S. District Court ruled that classifying people who entered the country without legal documents as mandatory detainees after the ICJ and DOJ started misclassifying people who entered the country without permission as more than likely an illegal practice. The DOJ and ICJ continue to deny people the opportunity at bond hearings, denying their Fifth Amendment rights to be accurately represented in court despite their citizenship status, which is a denial of human rights and, quote, violates constitutional and statutory due process rights as well as the Administrative Procedure Act. Trump has been found civilly liable for rape and defaming Jean Carroll, which makes him a violent convicted felon, which means Trump denied Carroll her human rights to say no, and in the process took her dignity, which are human rights violations. Trump has also been accused by over 25 women of sexual assault, many who have remained anonymous to protect themselves from Trump and his habit of defaming anyone who speaks out against him. Senator Elizabeth Warren has also stated publicly that Trump wants the government to serve him personally, not the American people, and that Trump's strategy to deploy the National Guard is politically motivated to silence dissent, which checks out as he has demonized all Democrats and anyone who holds different views than him. He has also deemed his opinions as universal and is working to silence anyone who disagrees with his administration, despite his administration violating many constitutional and statutory laws and orders made not only by the federal courts, but state courts as well. Trump has also declared that he hates Democrats because he believes they hate the United States, which is anti-American and a conspiracy. Plus, the language as it is incites political violence and influences hateful rhetoric against the American people. Trump's political advisor has also expressed extreme dissent for the Democratic Party, calling them an extremist organization and saying they're devoted to illegal alien killers and terrorists. He's gone as far as to brand the left as a domestic terror organization, which is a political conspiracy and calls for the disruption of a functioning democratic society, as this demonizes anyone who associates with the federally recognized political party due to an incident that no one besides the perpetrator is responsible for. It's also worth it to recite that Trump pardoned over 1,600 people found guilty of attending the January 6th riot at the White House following his loss of the presidential election in 2020, which was organized violence, and the fact that Trump pardoned people who attended is extremely anti-American and impedes on a functioning democratic society. Trump has also given crucial federal positions to people who've expressed extremist views on race, spreading racist and white supremacist speech, and have defended January 6th rioters who physically assaulted police officers. For example, Ed Martin, Trump's pardon attorney, has publicly praised a Nazi sympathizer, Timothy Hale Cuccinelli, and has tried to justify slavery using the Bible. Trump has also been spreading blatant lies, inaccurate representations, and exaggerated claims through both terms of his presidency. He's repeatedly lied and exaggerated about food and gas prices going down, inflation being down while he's in office, although it's risen during both of his terms. He's exaggerated inflation during Biden's term. He's lied and exaggerated about U.S. trade deficits, which literally just signifies the difference between how much we're buying and how much we're selling. He's lied about his tax cuts, which have proven to be a way of his to launder money using the federal government. He's lied and exaggerated foreign relations to gain political traction. He's repeatedly lied about immigration matters, for example, saying other countries deported people facing prosecution and mental asylum into the United States by, quote, emptying their jails, despite many officials debunking these ridiculous claims, and it's absolutely insane that anyone believed them in the first place. These actions fall under extremely anti American and corrupt capitalistic actions, political conspiracies, and conspiracies in general, and the disruption of a functioning democratic society. I also want to highlight a list of the top 10 worst things Trump has done in his second term, from allowing Elon Musk to illegally fire thousands of federal employees without warning or valid reason, to accepting bribes and selling out his presidency, weaponizing trade policy and immigration enforcement. Trump is, quote, in a league of his own when it comes to spreading falsehoods, creating chaos, and fueling division. These actions are anti American through and through, completely undermining and exploiting not only the federal government, but the American people and foreign governments as well. Trump has also been found to be guilty of pardoning extremely corrupt former U.S. officials and political allies, most of which are racist, misogynistic, and white supremacists, but some of which are just political allies and enjoy benefiting financially, politically, socially, and or personally from Trump's corrupt political agenda. And I do just want to give my 2 cents because I think everybody here needs to hear my 2 cents on these statistics. I don't think it will surprise you guys to find that 61% of people in the United States disapprove of Trump's immigration policies on deporting people without legal documents to places like the El Salvador prison, which is already a human rights violation and violates our constitution. But the El Salvador prison is notorious for human rights violations as it is, and 37% approve of these actions, making this legislation on immigration not only extremely radical and a violent violation of human rights, but unfavorable by the American people. 54% disapprove of ICE agents raiding workplaces, while 45% approve, again making the administration's legislation, which is already extremely unconstitutional, organized violence, and a conspiracy against human rights, unfavorable by the American people. Although 56% of people do favor the continuation of Trump's wall separating Mexico and the United States, it doesn't make it any less conspiratorial against human rights. The fact of the matter is, we don't need a wall. We need a federal government that genuinely cares about the health and wellness of all people, not just people born on American soil, and not just when it puts more money in their wallets or gains political traction. Life is not meant to be divided by walls. We should be more focused on true national and international security and economic stability by working with our allies, not political conspiracy and separation by dehumanizing and misrepresenting our allies, whom we've benefited from since the beginning. Thank you for your time.